Okay, good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is April Durr and I work at the Winston-Salem Foundation, and I'm joined by my colleague Anna Brewer. We work together on the community grants team, and we're just delighted that you all are with us this afternoon for our information session. This is going to be an informal session where we're just going to walk you through our newest grant opportunity capital improvement grants, and we're going to take your questions. So we invite you to share your name and organization in the chat if you're comfortable. You can turn your camera off and on as you're comfortable. And when we get to the Q&A portion, you can come off mute and ask your question, or you can put your question in the chat. And if we can't get to all the questions today, we can certainly follow up with folks after the session. And we'll also be posting this recording on our website. So if you need to leave early, or if you know someone that wasn't able to attend today, they're welcome to watch the recording link that we will post on our website. So again, welcome to everyone. Thank you all for being here. I see lots of familiar names and faces in the chat and on the screen, and just want to thank everyone for their time and their work in the community and for your interest in this new funding opportunity. So can I get a thumbs up if you're able to see my screen okay? Are folks seeing my screen? Great. Wonderful. So we are going to be looking at the nonprofit section of our website, which is where the grant opportunities are located. And hopefully you all are familiar with this section, because this is probably where you go when you're interested in learning about what the foundation has to offer. And so in our community grants, we have three main community grant opportunities. And the newest one that we'll be discussing today is our capital improvement grants. So I'm going to enter that section of the website. And we also have some links in the chat that you all are welcome to follow along on your own, or bookmark if you like. And Anna and I are going to be popping things in the chat periodically, because I know as folks enter the meeting, you don't always see the previous chat history. So for those of you who are with us from the beginning, just bear with us as we reshare some of those links into the chat. So here we are under the capital improvement grants, and these are for time-limited projects for local nonprofits and community groups to acquire, upgrade, and maintain physical assets such as property, buildings, technology, or equipment. And I do want to mention first and foremost that as a community foundation, we are focused in our geographic region, which is Forsyth County, North Carolina. So if we have any colleagues from other geographic regions on the call today, unfortunately, this opportunity will not be open for groups that are outside of Forsyth County. So you're welcome to stay on and listen, or you're welcome to drop off if that applies to you. We do have a few grant opportunities for neighboring counties in some of our other special fund grant programs, but for this particular grant program, it is focused on nonprofits serving Forsyth County. So if you are a nonprofit that is based elsewhere but serves Forsyth County, we would only be looking at the portion that is serving Forsyth County. So if you have specific questions about this, you can certainly put them in the chat or follow up with me after the session, but we are just want to make that disclaimer up front, because your time is valuable as well. And so what we will be funding through this program, it's up to a maximum request of $50,000. And this is not for things that are just the general expenses of running your nonprofit. So this would apply for new facilities, existing facilities, major material goods, technology, software, beautification, supplies. And we're looking for organizations that have a strong application in several areas. Because we anticipate getting a large number of requests, we've put this information out to be transparent and upfront with you all, so you can see how we're going to be reviewing the proposals that come in. So we'll be looking to see, does the applicant have 2 years of an organizational track record and operation in Forsyth County? Do you have financial statements showing how you manage your revenue and expenses? An audit is certainly helpful, but it's not required. We're also going to be looking at clear project plans in terms of what you're proposing for the capital project and how you're going to carry those plans out. And what is the need for the project? Is the description clear in why you need the capital improvement funding? Also, is your organization able to manage the scale of the project that you're proposing? And will you have the ability to maintain the ongoing maintenance costs of the project? And looking at your organizational leadership, do you have representation from the community that you serve? And how do you gain insights from the community that you serve in the areas that you work in? So we're going to be looking at all of these things listed here under the strong applicant will demonstrate in order to kind of evaluate and look at all the proposals, knowing that we probably will get more proposals than we're able to fund. And I mentioned that this funding is not going to be for general operating expenses. So if you're looking for funding for staff or services, utilities, things like that, that would not be a fit for this particular funding opportunity. And you all might be familiar with our web portal. At the bottom of the page here, you see some information about how to apply. So if you're already registered in the portal, that's great. You can just go into the portal with your current login information, and you'll see this grant opportunity listed in the menu of applications that are available at this time. If you're not registered in the portal, we do ask that you go ahead and request registration sooner rather than later, because we have to process that on our end and make sure you have enough time to get into the portal and that it's working so that you can prepare your application. So we have instructions on our website about the portal if that is applicable to you. So now I want to kind of open it up to see what questions have come in so far, and then I can go over some more specific details about some of the questions that I've already received through email and phone calls. We're certainly open to direct inquiries about this opportunity, keeping in mind that as the application deadline approaches, of course, inquiry volume goes up, and so it can be hard for us when it gets close to submission time to get back to everyone and to align schedules and things like that. So we encourage everyone to reach out sooner rather than later if you have specific questions. So I'm just looking here in the chat and looking across. So there's a question here from Linda. Please deepen my knowledge of the bullet that says organizations gain insights from people with lived experience. So for example, Linda, if you are serving youth, how are you getting input from youth or parents of youth? If you are serving an aging population, how are you getting input from people who are participating in your programs and services? So this lets the foundation see how you all are guiding your operations and your programs around people who are directly benefiting and participating in your services. So for example, if I had an idea to start a new program, but I didn't get any insights from the people in the program that I'm going to be serving, that might not be a very strong application compared to, say, another application where the organization has clearly worked in community side by side with residents and has that input as part of their decision making. This could also apply to your board and your leadership. So for example, who is on your board making decisions? Do you have anyone from the population that you serve on your board? Does your board represent the demographics of the community you serve? Is the board representative of the languages and cultures and ages that your organization serves? So hopefully that answer helps a little bit in deepening your understanding of that bullet. I'm looking in the chat here to see what other questions have come in.
It looks like Max also had a question about,
yeah.
Do you see that one?
I see it. Are organizations who were just awarded a capacity building grant eligible? Great question, Max. So the way that the foundation looks at our grant opportunities is these are all separate opportunities. So it is possible for an organization to have more than one type of grant open at the same time. So if you have capacity building, you could in fact also have a capital improvement grant. If you have a small grant, you could in fact have a capital improvement grant. If you have a focus area grant or a strategic initiatives grant or any of our other grant types, you could also have a capital improvement grant. So we look at each grant opportunity separately, and within that funding opportunity, there might be some guidelines. So for capital improvement grants, we're asking organizations that are funded to wait 3 years before they come in again with another new request. For capacity building, we ask that nonprofits only have one capacity building grant open at a time, unless the second one is focused in diversity, equity, inclusion. But you could also have a capital improvement grant open at the same time. So I hope that answers your question, Max. Great, he said, wonderful, thank you. So I'm also scanning the chat to see what other questions might be there. So we see here, for technology requests, are quotes required? Will it be okay if a quote is provided, but the market price changes at the time of funding? Carrie, great question too, because we know right now with the pandemic, prices are fluctuating on a weekly, daily, monthly basis. And so of course, it's great to have estimates or quotes when you're preparing a proposal, because it allows you to articulate what type of funding you need and the dollar amounts. And we understand that these numbers could fluctuate. So that's something for your organization to consider. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, a grant is made. Well, if a grant is made and a contract is signed for, let's say, $30,000, then if your contractor or vendor that you're working with, the price goes up, our grant is still going to be for the amount that was awarded. So how will your organization be able to adapt to potentially fluctuating market prices? So that would be something to consider when you're seeking this funding, because if a grant is made, it will be made for the amount, and then the contract will be signed for that amount. So we wouldn't then go back and necessarily change that amount. So it would be up to the organization to think through how they might handle that. So I hope that answers your question, Carrie. Okay, it looks like it. So there's another question here. When you mentioned supplies, would that include purchase of additional vans to convert for service? So I want to make sure I'm understanding this one. It looks like this one maybe came in directly, not in the group chat here, Carolyn. So I want to address it, but I don't know if I completely understand the question. So when we mention supplies, when we mention equipment, things of that nature, at the top here, you'll see these listed out. So we're talking about things that are either to maintain, upgrade, fix, repair. So that could be related to a van that you're converting for service. I'm not really sure what that entails, but vehicles are listed under major material goods. So you'll see here we have major material goods. This includes equipment, vehicles, and furniture. And then you'll see here we have supplies, we have technology, we have software, upgrades. So I'm not sure what all that entails to convert, but it sounds like that might be something to explore a little bit further, and potentially could be a capital improvement grant opportunity. I'm scanning to see if there are other questions in the chat, and feel free if you would rather. I know sometimes it's hard to type a question, so that's why we want this to be a conversation. And you can certainly come off of mute and verbally ask your question or make a comment, and you're welcome to do that at any time as well.
Hi, April. This is Carolyn Edmond.
Hey, Carolyn, how are you?
Sorry, I missed that major material good
Oh,
equipment
no,
part. So you
no
answered my
worries.
question. Thank you.
You're welcome. No worries at all. It's a lot to cover. So please, no worries at all. I just wanted to make sure I understood the question. So a couple of things I can name of questions that have come in prior to today's session. We already covered the geographic area. We often get that question a lot. The other question I'm getting a lot is related to the old process. So you might remember that the foundation made capital campaign grants in the past, and those grants were for organizations that were listed on the community's campaign calendar. And that committee disbanded its work after doing some strategic conversations in the community to hear from nonprofits, to hear from donors. And so the foundation was a member of that group and happened to have a funding opportunity available to organizations that participated in that calendar process. Well, when the calendar disbanded and the group disbanded, it gave us the opportunity to reimagine our capital grant making. So the other question I'm getting sometimes is, are we still doing that old process? And the answer is no. We are no longer doing the old process because essentially it no longer exists. There's no longer a campaign coordinating committee. There's no longer a calendar. And so when that work ended, we ended our grant opportunity that went along with that. We did have a transitional year where we were kind of working through that. And so now that we're in launching the new grant opportunity in the new year, this will be our new grant making opportunity for capital needs. And the two major differences with the old process and the new process is the old process was limited to the 3 to 4 organizations that were holding large scale fundraisers and were on the calendar. They could then apply for a grant. Well, now there's no longer a calendar, so it's open to more organizations. And you don't have to be holding a large scale fundraising campaign. You just have to have a capital need. So in the past, our funding at the foundation was tied to large scale fundraising campaigns and the calendar. Now it's open to all nonprofits. You don't have to be hosting a large scale fundraising campaign. You don't have to be on the community calendar. You just simply have to have a capital improvement need and then meet the requirements listed on the website. And if you're interested, for those organizations that this applies to, who maybe were meeting with the committee or were on the old calendar, we do have some archived information on our website for those of you that want to review that. And if you scroll down, you should see it here. Oh. Let's see, my computer's going a little slow. Right here in the middle of the page, it says for more information, you can click here. So we have that archived information with a lot of frequently asked questions, a statement from that committee. And essentially, you know, while that process and that calendar might have worked for decades, what we learned through that process of getting feedback from community members, donors, nonprofits, was that in the current day and time, that process really wasn't working as well as it once did. And it also inadvertently could have been perpetuating systems that were keeping folks from accessing philanthropic dollars because it was so limited to such a small number of organizations and a calendar process. And we know that nonprofits are fundraising differently, more ongoing campaigns. Of course, the pandemic has changed a lot of that work. And so we really took this as an opportunity to kind of rethink how we would address capital grants. And a lot of times I'm getting questions about the other members of that group, and I can't really speak to the other members of that group because it was always an application process or a conversation. So you can still approach any of the other members of that group to see what they might have available, but everyone had their own process. I just happened to be involved with our process. And so just wanted to mention that for folks that have questions about the old calendar. So I see a couple of questions in the chat here about that. So if we've gotten a capital campaign grant recently, even if it's not called a capital improvement grant, and followed a bit of a different process than what was outlined here, would we be ineligible for the capital improvement grant, right? So the question is basically, if you got the old grant recently, could you come in for this new grant? And it largely depends on when you got the old grant, and is it within the past 3 years or not? And so we can certainly talk through that and what it was for. So if you're an organization that has those kind of specific questions, feel free to ask them today while we're on this call, or we're certainly open to follow-up conversations after the call, since those really only apply to a couple of organizations, not really to everybody. Will you please review the deadlines for submission response? Oh, great, Linda, great question. So the portal opened mid-May, and we've already been getting some drafted applications, some completed, submitted applications, but you have until July 1st to submit your application. And so again, I encourage everyone, if you haven't already, to register for the portal, read the application, start drafting your answers. As long as you submit by July 1st, you'll then get a decision after a 3-month review period. So it will be towards the end of September when we'll issue those funding decisions. And if any questions come up during the review process, we will let you all know so that you can respond to those questions. So hopefully that answered the timeline question. And once you're in the portal, you'll see a lot of those dates and reminders. And once you've started a draft, when you log back in, it's going to remind you you have an open application that's going to be due soon. So that should help you. See if there's any other direct messages or group messages in the chat here.
It looks like there's 2 group questions.
Okay, let's see, I must have missed those. Was it above or below the one I just did? Because I'm not seeing.
I think it's above. The question is from Laura, and it says, what info would be important to include if pursuing beautification funding? Do you need a full-fledged landscape plan and a landscape line item budget?
Great question. So for beautification, there's a few pieces within the application, almost like questions that are going to auto-populate based on your answer. So when you select beautification, we're going to want to know, is this a public space, a private space? What are the estimated costs? And then as you get to the bottom of the application, there'll be some supplemental upload fields. These are optional, but if you do have any supplemental information you want to upload, a picture, a plan, a quote, you're welcome to do that. The main thing will be the estimated cost for the project and what type of impact the project is going to have on the community that you're serving, and being able to clearly explain your plan and the need for the funding. So hopefully that answers that question. And let's see, there was one more. I'm just trying to find it. Let's see.
Yes, that was from Jessica. Do you see it?
How many grants do you plan to award from this opportunity? Great question, Jessica. So we don't know exactly how many grants we will award, because we don't know how many applications we're going to get. We don't know if folks are going to ask for the maximum of 50,000, or if we're going to get a lot of requests for 5,000 and 10,000. It's going to largely depend in terms of the total number of grants that we're able to award through this opportunity. Of course, the foundation has a budget for its grant making, and then within each opportunity we have sub budgets for the different grant making opportunities. And so, it's really going to depend on the volume of applications that we get. I will say that this is our first time offering this particular grant opportunity in this way, and we are really trying to stay as open as possible to learn from you all what the needs are and to see how we can best respond to those needs. And so we will certainly be taking feedback. There's a question in the application that asks for feedback. We'll be taking feedback. It's possible that we can make slight adjustments from year to year as we practice continuous learning in our grant making, and as we make adjustments in how we are responding to community needs. But we have no idea. We anticipate a large number of applications, but we don't really know how much each application will request. And so it will go through the 3-month review process, and then we will issue those funding decisions at the conclusion of the review process. I think I've covered the questions that have come in the chat, either directly to me or to the group. If I've missed any, please feel free to repost them or verbally unmute and ask your question. The only other question that has come up that we haven't covered, if you're a faith-based organization, we ask that you review our guidelines to ensure that you align and are meeting the criteria for faith-based organizations. And then in terms of ownership, so for example, let's say somebody is owning property versus leasing or renting property. There are some questions in the application that are going to ask you about that, if that pertains to you. And so if it's property that you own, that's great. You can explain it. If it's property that you don't own, then you would have to explain why you are making these improvements to property that you don't own and what maybe is in your lease. Or again, it might be specific to your situation, but what will this funding make possible for your organization and the people that you serve? And so we ask that you explain that to us in your proposal. And again, we'll follow up if we have any questions. I see there's a few more folks who are joining us this afternoon, and we welcome you and thank you all for being here and making time to attend. We're about at the 30-minute mark, and we're welcome to stay on a little bit longer for additional questions, comments. For those of you who are just joining us, basically what we've done in the last 30 minutes is kind of walk through the information on our website under the grant seekers section for our new capital improvement grant opportunity. And after we walked through that information, we opened it up for a question and answer session. And we are recording this so that we can share the link later for folks who didn't make it or came late. This is an optional session. It's not required. It's just to help folks understand this new funding opportunity. Could you share a link to the guidelines for faith-based organizations? Yes, we will share the links in the chat again for folks who are just joining us. We have a wide variety of links that we've been sharing in the chat, but I know that this doesn't stay if you are just joining the chat. You're probably only seeing the most recent.
I just put the faith-based link in the chat.
Okay, great. And I'll put the other links in there. And again, just want to thank everyone for your work, for your time, and for your interest in this funding opportunity. Are there any other questions, comments, feedback that we could take back to our team at this time? Welcome you to come off mute or put it in the chat.
It looks like just as you were posting, another question came in.
Okay.
This opportunity, it's from Tony. This opportunity is not granted to any program that serves another county, even if the nonprofit is in Forsyth County.
Okay, so Tony, I want to make sure I'm understanding the question. So as a community foundation, our community grant opportunities are focused on charitable causes that nonprofits are serving people in Forsyth County, North Carolina. So if you are applying for a community grant, then you have to show that you are serving people here in Forsyth County, North Carolina. If you're located outside of Forsyth County, then you would have to show how you are also serving Forsyth County, and we would only be supporting a portion of the expenses based on, the volume of folks you're serving and how that compares to your larger footprint. If you are in Forsyth County, but also serving other communities outside of Forsyth County, the same would apply. So we would be looking at, you know, your larger footprint and then the piece that you're serving here in Forsyth County, and looking at how those expenses, say you're applying for a project that the overall project might have a price tag of $40,000. Well, what percentage of that is going to benefit Forsyth County, and what percentage of that is going to benefit other communities? We wouldn't be able to support the expenses that are going to other communities. So we would just look at the piece that is focused in Forsyth County. So hopefully that answered that question. Are there other comments or questions or things we can clarify? And again, this section of the screen that I'm sharing, capital improvement grants, is the best place to go. It has all the information and a link to our web-based application portal. Okay, well, another question came in. Austin, if the project included in the proposal exceeds the max award amount, is it better to request the full grant amount or request less but show available organizational funding? So you can request up to $50,000. So if your project is $50,000, you could essentially request all of it from the foundation. If your project is, you know, $100,000 or $80,000, you could request up to $50,000, and then you could show how you plan to cover those other expenses above and beyond the $50,000 through your organizational budget, other grants, donors, partnerships. If the project is more than $50,000 and you don't really have a plan for how you're going to cover those other costs, that might be something to think about as you're working on your proposal. Again, you might remember in the middle of the website here, we talk about a strong application will demonstrate these things. And so how you have the capacity to manage the scale of the project would also come into play here as you look at the expense of the overall project. So you're welcome to request the full amount from us if it's within the threshold of this grant opportunity, and if the project exceeds the $50,000, then how will you all come up with a plan to cover those additional costs to make the project actually happen? Thank you, Linda. And thank you all again for taking time out of your busy day to come to this info session to hear more about the opportunity and to ask questions. As I mentioned, we'll share the recording. We will stay in touch with applicants during the review process. There's another question here. Check Salem needs question. I'm not sure. Did I miss that one? Does the foundation ever give partial grants? Oh, here it is. As in the request was for more, but then the foundation offered them less. Great question. Sorry, I missed that one. Y'all, the chat has been busy, which is great. So yes, it's possible that an applicant submits a proposal and three things could happen. The proposal could be fully funded, the proposal could be declined, the proposal could be partially funded. If a partial grant is made, then when we send the grant packet and the contract, you have the opportunity to think through that. And if you feel like you can accept the partial funding and still carry out the project, sometimes organizations aren't able to accept partial funding and carry out the project, so maybe they're not interested in partial funding. But yes, we would have that conversation at the time that funding decisions are made, and it is possible that partial funding is awarded. Usually partial funding is awarded because of either the geographic region or some of the expenses fall outside of the scope of this funding opportunity, or perhaps there were pieces of the application that weren't as clear or as strong and the activities didn't really align, but maybe there was a piece of the application that did. And so it is possible that partial funding would be available. Hopefully that answered the question. Sorry, I missed that one. Hopefully I haven't missed any other questions in the chat here. We'll give a few minutes of of good silence in case any other thoughts or questions come up. And we'll certainly stick around for anyone that wants to stay on. But if those of you only allotted 30 minutes for this, it's now, after 12:30. And so we certainly understand if folks need to hop off. So thank you all so much for your work and for your time and your interest. I'm glad it's been helpful, Laura. And if it's not been helpful, we want to hear from you too, so we can do better next time. So hopefully this was helpful. Thank you all. You all take care, and we'll stay in touch.